The Magic in Your Mind, written by U.S. Andersen. This book is in the public domain. Chapter 10. Creating Your Own Talent. Creativeness contains a secret. The creative man exhibits a deep psychic tie with the inscrutable mystery of life. He performs in his work with the same naturalness as the flower grows from the soil, for he has attained to a unity in mental and spiritual relationships that make him seem part of the thing he is doing. The consummate artist becomes one with his task, so allied with it in movement and being that it becomes almost impossible to discern where the man ends and the work begins. Carl Jung states that it was not Goethe who created Faust as much as it was Faust that created Goethe. One seems absolutely dependent upon the other, since each represents the same thing. Faust is an extension of Goethe, just as Goethe is an extension of Faust. The artist incarnate. Talent is an absolute blending of the individual with his work. Paintings of the great painter become the painter, just as the painter becomes the great paintings. When we see a person who exhibits a great talent, we know at once a kind of ecstasy at this manifestation of a supreme mind and skill. All exhibition of a talent is a kind of religious experience to those who behold it, for it establishes a communion between the secret self and the individual. There is a living and superforce whose sphere of action is largely invisible and outside the boundaries of our workaday world. There is something more purposeful than atoms. There is a higher evolved intelligence than any that is contained within the human brain. There is a door into a world beyond, which sometimes opens and allows the individual to be seized by strange potencies tremendously above the level of his personal abilities. When that happens, we see the artist incarnate, the man with a super talent, who is able in one sphere of his activity to demonstrate directly to us the incalculable power and wisdom and beauty of the divine. The mystery of the talented man is that he is rooted directly in universal mind, that it manifests through him without any restriction or distortion by the ego. It is not the man who is responsible for his work, but a power beyond and above him that is manifesting through him, using him as an instrument. In deepest essence, each man is an artist and only comes to his complete fulfillment as an individual when he gets his egoistic nature out of the way and allows the creative talent of the divine to work through him, to accomplish those tasks that can best be done through his individually honed nature. When we live out our lives focused in the ego and bound to egoistic desires and satisfactions, it becomes impossible for us to achieve a spiritual awakening or to fulfill ourselves as creative persons. The world of material things is too much with us. Desires to be better, to have more, to live in material comfort, blind us to the long reaches of existence. This little life we live is important not for the creature comforts it brings, but for the search it involves us in. Until we make our primary purpose the discovery of who we are and where we came from and what our relationship to life is, we must live out our brief sputtering of the candle in complete unawareness and blind automatism, following the pressures that develop in the outer world as they impinge upon our senses. The creative vision. When the inner soul of man is touched by perception of the creative side of his nature, he sees at once the disaster inherent in a conduct of life based upon material goals. He sees that this thing he has always thought himself to be, his ego, is illusory, that the desires growing out of the ego lead him into a maze of intricate byroads that inevitably will lose his chance of enlightenment. Such a man may give up all possessions, all fame, all creature comforts, so as to be misled no longer, and take up his existence with a resolve to be motivated in all things through an inner light that proceeds out of universal mind. Such enforced asceticism allows the individual to engross himself completely in the service of the secret self. John the Baptist, prowling the wilderness in search of his immortal soul, is no more an example of it than is the French painter Gauguin, giving up a career and family to exile himself on a South Sea island to paint pictures. Each has been touched by the creative vision. Each must serve it at all cost. When a man's eye have been opened to the creative nature of the divine, he no longer can help himself, must serve it as an instrument, and nothing stands in his way. The creative process is impersonal. It seizes the nature and uses it to the utmost, and the person performs feats of creation far above anything possible to his normal conscious mind. When this force truly predominates in our makeup, it monopolizes our energy. In the awakened artist, life is ruled by the subconscious. Conscious intention means little, and the man is swept along on subterranean currents in which he is firmly enmeshed and in which he joyfully participates. Common consciousness. Participation mystique is the secret of artistic creation and consists of a swallowing up of the individual by the secret self, so that the man becomes an outlet for the manifestation of the beauty and variety and infinite complexity of universal mind. No one truly does a thing well when he does it with conscious intention. His effectiveness in action is always the result of unthinking naturalness. He does not come to skill and works through objective analysis of his action as separate from the action of others, but through a complete identification of himself with the work to be done. Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote, "From my very childhood, I have been accustomed to abstract, and as it were, unrealized whatever of more than common interest my eyes dwelled on, and then, by a sort of transfusion and transmission of my consciousness, to identify myself with an object." Participation in the life of another through a mystic medium of common consciousness is the essence of artistic creation. The man who affects to do something through conscious intention and at the urging of the separate and unique desires of the ego is performing by the light of one candle in an arena where thousands of kilowatts are available. He cannot possibly create a true and effective work through the limited knowledge and tiny scope of his conscious mind. All intentioned works of art are flat and useless and depict only cliches and are not truly works of art at all, but only a kind of syncretism of the elements of knowledge available to the ego. Such effort in writing is journalism, in art, poster painting, in music, dollar mongering, and the individual who performs thus, even though masquerading under the mantle of artist, is actually destroying himself through knowledgeable corrupting of his talent. Every man has a talent in some area of his nature, as big a talent as has ever existed, and if this talent has not manifested, it is because his egoistic nature has dammed it up. No matter how long the dam has existed, no matter how tightly controlled the egoistic nature, the dam can be broken, and the power can be let loose, and a man can realize the highest level of his talent and live the life of the artist incarnate. To turn the eye within and to release the egoistic nature from selfish desire is the first thing to be done. Once the whole nature is turned over to a power greater than it is, to be used for whatever purpose, without aim or intention, then the power comes through. Then the man begins to be transformed, performing naturally in all circumstances, guided correctly in all actions. Psychic position. There is tremendous joy in correct psychic positioning of the ego. There is a feeling of usefulness that comes to the individual, a rooted certainty in his soul that he is performing in the best manner possible. This is the feeling of grace that comes to the religious man. This is the time of creativity that comes to the artist. This is the period of great productivity that comes to the businessman. This is the time of superior skill that comes to the athlete. Each serves, performs under the impulsion of an intelligence and talent so vastly superior to the surface mind that the relationship is accepted as a happy child follows a loving father. Of this time of attunement and consequent creation, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "One can hardly reject completely the idea that one is the mere incarnation or mouthpiece or medium of some almighty power. The notion of revelation describes the condition quite simply, by which I mean that something profoundly convulsive and disturbing suddenly becomes visible and audible with indescribable definiteness and exactness. One hears, one does not seek, one takes, one does not ask who gives. A thought flashes out like lightning, inevitably without hesitation. I have never had any choice about it. Everything occurs quite without volition, as if in an eruption of freedom, independence, power, and divinity." It takes courage to push off into the unknown realms of the subconscious. It takes daring and boldness to abandon the little ship of egoistic self and swim to that uncharted island of the secret self that lies beyond the horizon. Many people cling to their egoistic natures as if they might be saved by them instead of inevitably abandoned. Pain and frustration and ineffectuality are the only rewards that come to the man who follows his ego. And yet, he often clings to his false idol through thick and thin, much as a drowning man grasps at a straw. Often he has so educated himself to the existence of the phantom he worships that even when he sees he is deluded, he cannot bear to part with his ghost. But part he must. Push off into the uncharted regions of the subconscious he must, for finally his ego self abandons him altogether, breaks down and disintegrates with this disintegration of the body. In the end, he realizes that he must throw himself upon the mercy and grace of something infinite and eternal, which caused him to be born in the first place and now causes him to die. No daring is fatal. Accident, perversion, illness, and ineptitude are the lot of the apprehensive. The prize is always to the bold, and the courageous own the universe. But despite these obvious facts, the majority of people cower in caves and refuse to abandon the flimsiest security and strike out in quest of the great and the good. If you have the courage to take a chance, you will not be abandoned by fate. The universe works on the side of the man who aspires. It gives wings to birds and fins to fish and touches the toes of the tightrope walker with magic. No daring is fatal, wrote Rene Crevel. The secret self has a cherished place for its torch bearers. Along the tenuous lines of evolution, the bold and the brave let a mighty advance. An irresistible force proceeds out of the man who has courage and tenacity in his heart. He cannot be stopped because he is being used by an infinite and omnipotent power. But those who pull the shells of their egos about them and refuse either to dare or aspire are by this psychological act squeezing the juices of life from their bodies and their souls. They must inevitably disintegrate because they have refused to grow. To let go of ego and to center oneself in the consciousness of universal mind is the greatest adventure possible because it means casting off from safe shores and voyaging beyond visible horizons. Yet once this initial step is made, once a man ceases responding to the material world, once he turns his mind and body and heart over to the secret self, he is astounded at once by his inner joy and serenity. Only the surface self can know fear, and once it has been subordinated, so is fear subordinated. The ego has something to lose only because it sees itself as separate. Once this idea of separateness has given over to a basic perception of unity, the individual no longer knows fear because he has nothing to lose. A sense of being a part of all things and a part of all life is a psychic condition that produces the most indescribable satisfaction. It is the ecstasy reported by mystics, the sense of creativity reported by artists, the religious revelation reported by the saints. It is denied no one. It is possible to all. Once it comes to a man, it provides a springboard for the development of a talent by which he is able to express the infinite nature of the divine. Metaphysical adventure. Religious revelation is exactly the same thing as creative activity. They are both metaphysical adventures. They involve the acquisition of a total instead of a partial view of the universe. They are out of time and space and individuality and are centered in eternal terms and whole significances. Talent develops in a person when his spiritual awakening has begun, because talent is inherent in each of us, and the purpose of life is that we be creative. When the spiritual awakening is true, so will the talent be true, and not compulsive or obsessional, allowing the individual to perform his work out of sheer joy, dropping his fruits like a ripe tree. It then becomes possible for him to obey his instincts and intuitions and not to be inhibited in his actions by what others expect of him. He gets near the heart of truth because he sees the sham and hypocrisy that are bound to partiality. He subordinates his partiality completely in all his actions and thought, and the talent that is visited upon him is the talent of something beyond him. Art speaks to us in symbols of the universality of our true being. By it we perceive a portion of that ecstasy and unity from which we have sprung. By it we are able to achieve an inkling of the great destiny that awaits man. Someday men will become thoroughly awakened spiritually and consequently completely religious, not just believers as a few men are now, but knowers, causers, prime movers, thoroughly enlightened, gods in fact, even as now in potential. The attitude that results from a man's discovery of his inherent talent is not one of intentioned action or thought, but one that looks for discovery. The creative writer does not take a pen with it the idea of making a certain thing, but only to see what will come through him and manifest itself on paper. The man who truly uses his talent is able to do so only because he lets it use him. The correct mental attitude is that whatever is there will come through and need neither be started nor stopped. You do not have to know what is coming, what it will look like, but simply have an open mind and let it through. Never even bother to look at it closely, for if you do, you may think you know what it is, and by that mental fixation, you will make it static and it no longer will grow and be flexible and creative. All that is great and good and lasting springs out of the subconscious process of the secret self. And when we are moved by our greater minds, we exhibit the talents that are ours. A quote by Amy Lowell. God guard me through those thoughts men think in the mind alone. He that sings a lasting song thinks in a marrow bone. End of quote. Creative labor. 1,000 faces has the secret self, approached by 1,000 doors, and when one is opened and that face beheld, there bursts through the individual a torrent of creativeness, a kind of super talent. Partial is the human being, barely aware, a surface manifestation of unlimited realms of subconscious intelligence. But there is a path by which each may penetrate universal mind. And when he does, he creates his own talent, depicting for the world some particular aspect of the divine. No man is denied talent except by himself. When he allows his consciousness to be hemmed in by the ego, he is unable to pull upon subconscious levels for the inspiration and drive necessary to creative work. Unique individuality is the vehicle which the secret self uses for the manifestation of talent, and is largely being stultified by our modern industrial society. Our education teaches conformity. The industrial machine needs workers, and workers must be predictable, and predictability, as far as society is concerned, is best obtained by inculcating the same social conscience in each man. Consequently, the individual lives a routine that is not of his own choosing, but has been selected for him by society. His opinions also have been given him by the group, and he accepts them as part of the condition of his life. All thinking is done for him. He believes the political institution best that he belongs to, the labor union best that he belongs to, the state, city, and community best that he belongs to. He is unable to make an objective decision about anything he encounters, but reacts to everything as it affects his performed opinions. This egoistic basis for judging things is completely false and completely static, because it does not allow the individual to grow. Truth in some final analysis may be absolute, but for the individual man, it is an individual matter. What is good for one is not necessarily good for all, but neither is the good of all necessarily best for the individual. As long as man continues to live in groups, social conscience will continue to have a distinct and necessary function. But such social conscience must make provision for individual growth and responsibility, for it now tends to defeat itself by making automatons of its adherents. Large industrial firms are finding that the idea box in the plant pays dividends. When a worker is encouraged to think creatively about the business in which he labors, his mental attitude toward the business is changed. He not only becomes more efficient in his task, but sooner or later contributes toward the growth of the business. No man is built to put nuts on bolts all day. That is the task of a machine. But a man may endure such a job if allowed to pursue means by which it may be done more efficiently. Naturally, he will not be disposed to such activity if he feels that it may result in his being without a job at all, but only if he feels that he will be rewarded with a better job or a better income. The basic problems in industrial advancement are delineated by the opposing forces of labor and management. Organized labor has grown as a protection to the worker from exploitation, but its psychological position has become static. It is largely opposed to advances in technology that may do away with job categories, and featherbedding in all industries have achieved such proportion as to be a distinct burden on efficient operation. The solution to effective industrial growth is not likely to be found in organized labor, but rather in an enlightened management which makes its labor force part of its creative effort, rewards each man on an individual basis, and allows participation of every member of the organization in the fruits of that organization. When such industrial enlightenment finally is achieved, there will be a unification of labor and management because their aims will be the same, and each man will have a creative responsibility toward his work. Productivity. Creative talent demands production. The displacement of ego in favor of the guidance of the secret self results in a man being driven to accomplish tasks that heretofore he would have considered impossible. No mountain is too high, no wilderness too broad, and the creative soul attuned to the divine labors and produces unremittingly. Thomas Carlyle wrote, "Even in the meanest sorts of labor, the whole soul of man is composed into a kind of real harmony the instant he sets himself to work. Produce, were it but the pitifulest, infinitesimal fraction of a product, produce it in God's name." For the most part, we are too inhibited and repressed to be able to express the personality that is uniquely our own. The ego-controlled nature acts always in accord with an idea of how people expect it to act. Since it does not know itself, It does not know how it truly feels, but adopts feelings from desire goals rather than from the individuality innate to it. The man who endures all to make money is a classic example of repression and inhibition. He swindles his inferiors and fawns on his superiors, and by his consequent warping of moral values, so completely represses the secret self that it is impossible for him to be creative or spontaneous in any area of his activity. Making money is not an end in life. Pursuing the god Mammon has only fatal results. But achievement is one of life's primary aims, and achievement often results in monetary success. To be what we naturally are and to live and act as we naturally were created should be the primary aim of each of us. We have been put here on earth by a power greater than we are. We have been manifested in our particular form so as to reflect in humanity an image of the divine. We cannot reflect this image or do the work natural to us if we become repressed by centering our consciousness in our egoistic natures. Spontaneity is the secret of doing things well. A man acts in accord with his whole nature when he does things feelingly instead of thinkingly. Reason is valuable too, but it serves a limited world and a limited knowledge. When a man acts only according to his reason, he acts with the barest facts in his possession. But when he acts instinctively and intuitively, he acts as an instrument of the secret self, and behind his action lie all knowledge, all intelligence, all power. When you are spontaneous in your actions and in your thoughts, you are being yourself. And when you are being yourself, you are 100 times more effective, more joyful, more creative than you are when you are ordering your life in accordance with the aims of the surface mind. The consciously controlled and intentioned man is suppressing his talent, for he is suppressing the action of the divine within him. No talent ever is exhibited by the conscious mind or ego, and the man whose life is ordered by them never can be creative. Get into the game. Let yourself go. Shake off inhibition and fear, and be yourself. Learn to think and act naturally, spontaneously. Harmony and symmetry will enter your life, and you will discover your inherent talent. Most people never find their proper niches simply because they inhibit the talent they possess. It takes courage to go out on a limb and do the things that are natural. It is much easier to sit on the sidelines, watch somebody else perform, and criticize. Monday morning quarterbacks are notorious in football, and in the world of art, it has long been axiomatic that the critic is a frustrated artist. Fulton Arsler reports, "One winter's night many years ago, when I was no more than 20, I was belaboring a typewriter in the newsroom of the Baltimore American. A copy boy summoned me to the office of the managing editor, a bald-headed old walrus with white mustache like hanging gardens and a perverse sense of humor. Leaning back in his swivel chair, he asked me, 'Do you play the piano?' 'No, sir.' 'Fiddle?' 'No, sir.' 'Sing?' 'No, sir.' 'Then go up to the lyric and cover the concert. Our music critic just dropped dead. You've got the job.' If hindsight were foresight, we'd all be kings. It takes little imagination and absolutely no enterprise to recognize the errors of people who have the courage to try when the outcome is in doubt. Creative talent carries with it an element of deepest personal risk. Before the individual becomes a fit vehicle, he must figuratively hang himself from a cliff by his fingertips, suspend himself between life and death. In this psychological position of awareness of the basic elements of life, he no longer is confused about the purpose of the secret self, is able to pierce quickly the sham and subterfuge of egoistic action and thought, and to act always as an instrument of the divine. A deep indifference to the opinions of others existing side by side with recognition of a common spiritual bond brings to the individual his true and unique personality, allows his whole life to be an expression of that particular facet of the Supreme that is best able to manifest through him. Thus he discovers his talent. It may be in the arts, the sciences, business, war, or politics, but wherever he finds his niche, he will fit into it as a hand in a skin-tight glove, as if he and it were made for each other, and he will perform his work in such a manner as to be completely indistinguishable from it. Tempering by fire. Every creative individual must undergo a tempering process during which he is subjected to fire, after which his toughness is increased. Life is not such a gentle thing as to be approached with dainty fingers. Look about, and you will see that nature chooses her blessed ones by subjecting them to the most severe tests. Out of the crucible of conflict emerge the lion-hearted, and they are the ones who carry the banner of evolution onward. The man who subjects himself to the sternest of trials is in the end the best instrument for effectuation of the purposes of the secret self. It is he through whom mighty works are done, upon whom great events hinge. The exercised muscles grow stronger, the exercised mind grows smarter, the exercised heart grows bolder, but nothing destroys as quickly as disuse. Repression and inhibition do more toward girdling man around with limitation than any obstacle he faces. If a thing were as easy to do as to say all of us would be saints, exercising fear, anxiety, and hostility from the consciousness is not a simple matter and is nearly impossible as long as the ego rules the nature. In order for the individual life to be natural, it is necessary that it be lived as an extension of the divine. Reason must be subordinated as primary principle. Emotion must be subordinated as guiding force. Action and thought must develop spontaneously and effortlessly as a result of the consciousness being placed in the position of observation rather than origination. The development of talent depends upon spiritual awakening. The unawakened individual is born with talent, but if unawakened during his lifetime, literally is eaten up by the force that possesses him, because he is unable to express it, and the opposing sides of his nature are constantly at war with each other. Do what you are. Dale belonged to the United States Marine Corps during World War II and fought through 5 campaigns with extreme bravery. Prior to his enlistment, he had gone to art school, and his early works in oil showed much promise. The danger and disaster he faced in the Marines, however, altered his attitude, and once he was discharged, he made up his mind that he wanted material possessions. He set about acquiring them, took a job in an advertising agency as a layout man, gradually advanced to art director, received a salary that enabled him to live in comfort. He was far from happy, however. Easel and paints were forgotten, and nightly journeys to cocktail bars took on such dimension that he seldom went to bed without being drunk. Before long, he was drinking during the day also, and it became obvious to his intimates that he was harboring a deep core of resentment. When this resentment finally manifested in an arthritic attack, Dale was sent to bed by his doctor, and there had time to think. One day, an old friend from his art school days, now pursuing a career as a painter, came to him and they talked. His friend looked at the sumptuous apartment. "You must be making it pretty good," he said. "Sure thing," answered Dale. $20,000 a year and all the trimmings. Practically anything I want. How about you?" His friend smiled. "I'm lucky if I do $3,000 a year, and you could put my little studio in one corner of this apartment." "Then why not give it up?" asked Dale. Come into the ad agency. I'll start you at 10,000. Dale's friend shook his head. No, thanks, he said. I'm happy the way I am. You are? Asked Dale. Yes. Really happy, huh? You bet, aren't you? I couldn't be more miserable. Then it strikes me that you're the one who ought to change. There isn't enough money in the world to lock me up into an unhappy job. You're not painting, are you? I don't see an easel or a canvas in the whole apartment. I've given it up, answered Dale. So you've given it up and you're flat on your back and you've got lots of money and you're unhappy. I'll tell you something. There's a studio right next to mine and the rent is $30 a month. You give up your job and move in there and begin to paint again. Unless I miss my guess, that's the cure for what ails you. After his friend left, Dale thought it over. That evening he obtained brushes and oils and started to paint. By the end of a week he was deeply engrossed, and his arthritic pains had gone. He moved out of his apartment and into the studio and has been painting ever since. He smiles cheerfully now in his paint-stained smock. I made $2,500 last year, he says, which is big money for a painter, but it barely kept the wolf away from the door. Still, I couldn't care less about that wolf. All I want to do is paint. When I paint, I am completely happy because I'm doing something that is part of me. Creativeness and competitiveness. Somerset Maugham wrote, "The artist can, within certain limits, make what he likes of his life. In other callings, in medicine, for instance, or the law, you are free to choose whether you will adopt them or not. But having chosen, you are free no longer. You are bound by the rules of your profession. A standard of conduct is imposed upon you. The pattern is predetermined. It is only the artist who can make his own." When you turn your life over to the secret self, the channel in you best adapted for expression of the divine is cleared and developed, and a unique talent is exposed. A direction of growth is opened, within which you are perfectly free. It has little to do with your position in society or your membership in social groups. Your mind and talent develop independently of material associations because you have turned them over to the secret self to use as they are best fitted. Each of us most satisfies himself as a person and fulfills himself as a member of society when he lives the life of an artist. Not necessarily that of a painter or writer, but an artist in the sense that his attitude toward all things is creative rather than competitive. The world of competition is the world of egoistic desire, for competition seeks ascendancy over others. Peoples whose ruling passion is to bring themselves better usually look upon the world with hostile eyes and regard every man as an enemy. Such limited perception of the nature and purpose of life clearly destroys more often than it blesses. For victory always is temporary, and defeat awaits all whose lives revolve around superiority. The ego is born, blooms, withers, and dies, just as the material body, and the individual whose aspirations center around it must follow a cycle that leads to eventual defeat and disintegration. Oh, the noonday of the ego is fine. A man in possession of his full powers may stand upon his individual mountain and beat his chest and defy the world. But noon quickly passes and the day of his life wanes, and noontime becomes a very dim memory as the shadows lengthen. In order to participate freely and fully in all things, the wider vision that perceives the majestic onward march of evolution must be adopted by the individual as basic in his attitude toward life. Such a man may appear to be competitive through participating in the competitive things, but he does not compete through egoistic desire to be better or superior, only as a result of having opened himself as a vehicle for the manifestation of the secret self. He is used in all things and is never the user. And because he sees his basic unity with all men, he is able to enter competition without hostility, neither for gain nor loss. He is able to regard with equal mindfulness those he vanquishes and those who vanquish him, for each represents to him the same immutable person whose manifestation he knows he is himself. Surrender brings control. The truly creative attitude is a passive one, insofar as it listens and does not command. Yet what is wrought through the individual whose ear is attuned to the divine is charged with the most vital energy imaginable, far surpassing anything possible to egoistic willpower. It is ego will that eventually breaks the individual through constantly throwing him against obstacles that are immovable because they are not understood. Willpower seeks to batter down doors that are best approached with a key. The enlightened man is a talented man because he is a creative man, and this creativity is instilled in him by a sense of unity with all things. Obstacles and opposition and enemies have meaning for him only as they indicate a lack of understanding within himself, and he never seeks accomplishment by running headlong at things, but only by attempting to mentally and spiritually penetrate their true meaning. A quote by Theragatha: "My teacher is the conqueror, knowing all and seeing all, the master infinite, in pity all the world's physician. He and he it is by whom these truths are taught." End quote. Has the ship of your life come to disaster through running aground on uncharted shoals? If so, the greatest lesson you can learn is now possible, for your ship never would have grounded if the proper navigator were charting the course. Your surface self and egoistic nature have been at the helm, and the limited perception of surface mind could not possibly know of the uncharted shoals. Now your ship is aground, and the only way that it can be freed is to give over command to the master who knows these waters well. Surrender is the principle by which ultimate control is gained. The bossy surface self continually tries to run the show, and its enamoring cry of I may easily delude the whole consciousness into limited life and knowledge. But when a person runs into sufficient pain and difficulty, a crack appears in the hard veneer of the ego, and a light is let through which illuminates all for one startled instant of awareness. Then a man knows that his life and self are in the hands of something greater than he is, that his identity with the surface mind has always been an illusion, which in this moment of enlightenment he is freed from. Creative men affect us as being rich in possibilities. They are ripened trees that drop their fruit, and we scarcely can be near them without attaining to some unexpected good. The creative man's attitude has an aspect of abundance, as if he has some mystical tie with a horn of plenty, not of material things necessarily, but of ideas and possibilities that give a universal note to everything he does. A good thing is effective and generative. It grows and propagates and makes room for itself. It springs into being through an irresistible creative urge of a universal mind, and the vehicle of its manifestation always is the man with an artistic attitude toward life. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "The true artist has the planet for his pedestal. He sees the possibilities inherent in all things, is a discoverer in the universe, and interpreter for his less enlightened fellows." Freeing your talent. Each man is by some secret liking connected to a particular aspect of life. When he has become freed of the repressions, limitations, and inhibitions imposed upon him by his education and training, he is able to expose his subconscious preference and by it attune himself with the creative talent that naturally is his. Such talent has limitless possibilities for manifestation. It need have no connection with the so-called arts. It may be as simple a thing as a talent for kindness or love. It may be a talent for speaking, for persuasion, for teaching, for research, for study. It may be in science or business, but wherever it is, it will prove on exposure to be vastly superior to the abilities of people who are guided solely by competitive aims and egoistic desires. It will proceed out of an inexhaustible fount, be superior to the person, seem to use him rather than he use it. His ordinary mortal self will live with his talent in a constant state of startled delight. He will know it is a visitation of something above and beyond him, will treat it at all times with loving care, follow it, obey it, never command it. The most completely frustrating thing that can happen to the individual life is for inherent talent to fail to develop. Such failure only can come about through the ego controlling the nature, restricting the individual's growth in the direction intended. The torrent of creative energy that exists in every human being becomes dammed up only with the gravest danger. Resentment, bitterness, hate, and hostility are the emotional maladjustments that result from a frustrated creative nature, and these inevitably find their counterparts in physical illness. Heart trouble, circulatory disease, arthritis, rheumatism, cancer, ulcer are all psychosomatic symptoms resulting from dammed up creative energy. It not only is imperative that we free our talent in order to become fulfilled as individuals, but it also is imperative that we free it in order to live physically vigorous lives, in order to have healthy bodies. These ends can be accomplished only by lowering our egoistic barriers, by turning our lives over to the divine to be used for whatever purpose our basic natures are best suited. Blend into our task and our work in such a manner that we seem an extension of our activities and they an extension of us. We achieve an effectiveness in action that is directly proportional to the degree that we have turned our lives over to the secret self. And the manifestation that comes through us of superior action and skill is not possessed by the surface self, but uses it as an instrument to effect its purpose in the world. Your separate star. True artists we all are inherently, for each of us reflects an image in the growing body of mankind of the one mind and intelligence that lies behind creation. We paint a picture as we go through life of that mystic and occult realm whence we originated, and to which we one day will return. When we depart, the picture remains, with our signature in the corner, and is just as surely the representation of what we saw and felt and heard and attempted to communicate as is the picture of the painter, signed and hung up on the wall of the gallery. And in the final analysis, who is to judge which division is the most beautiful or worthwhile? For if a man live the life of an artist, his hand is guided by a will other than his own, and what is wrought through him is wrought at the behest of the divine, whose deft brushstrokes are gradually adding to the picture of eternity and infinity. Throw off the egoistic bounds that hold you and allow the secret self to shine through. You will become the artist incarnate. A talent will begin to develop in you toward which your whole nature can be lent. You will begin to do the work that only you can do, that will fulfill you as a human being and as an aspiring soul. Wherever your heart leads, you may joyfully follow with an inner certainty that you are acting in accord with the deepest motivations of life. A quote by Rudyard Kipling. Each for the joy of working and each in his separate star shall draw the thing as he sees it, for the God of things as they are. End of quote. And also the end of chapter 10. Hopefully you're enjoying this. I would love for you to leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about this chapter. What is the good takeaway you have? And before we head over to chapter 11, please do hit that like button, share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel. I'll meet you at the next video for chapter 11, how to use your sixth sense.